Hi everyone, Erica Barunda with Exude Luxury Group. Today I have Elena Groves, COO of Groves Capital. She has allowed us to come into her beautiful home and do this interview today. So thank you so much for having us here today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited.
Of course. So today's topic that we're going to be talking about is seller carryback and seller financing. Elena, I have been seeing this in listings that I see on homes that have been sitting on the market for a little bit longer. I'm seeing these creative advertising remarks on a marketing of a listing where it says seller carryback, seller willing to finance. And so I'm getting a lot of questions from sellers about this and buyers. Could you help us and educate us what a seller carryback is and what that means for a buyer and a seller?
Yeah, so what is a seller carryback? Thank you, Erica, for bringing that up. That's definitely a hot topic that we're hearing, not just in real estate, but in mortgage. And a seller carryback is basically seller financing. So it's when the seller is still involved in the transaction, even after it's technically been sold to the new buyer, but they are providing the financing for it, whether it be on a first loan or a second loan. The seller will be providing the financing, servicing the loan, and most likely still on title. So it also hinders your ability to fully take ownership of the property.
I'm glad you said that, and just kind of the end of it, how it hinders the ability to buy the property. What do you mean by it hinders? Because it almost sounds too good to be true. Like you can just go to the seller and get financing without going to your bank. I'm a big believer of if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. And this whole seller carryback financing seems a little too good to be true and very easy. I'm curious, as a buyer, if I were to take on that option of getting seller financing, what are the pros and what are the cons of getting into an agreement of that sort?
So from a buyer's perspective, your intention is to buy the property. It's to be your primary residence, second residence.
Right.
So the potential pros in seller carryback would be only, in my opinion, when and if you are not able to get traditional financing. Traditional financing or cash is always going to be the best solution because you don't want to involve a seller, because that's the whole point. They're trying to sell it. They're trying to get rid of it. They want you to buy it. So if you can get traditional financing from a bank or if you have cash, absolutely go that route. The only pro that I can see in that scenario would be if they cannot qualify traditionally and the seller is able and willing to provide financing in some capacity to the borrower to allow them to then purchase the home. The negatives for me are what really stand out in this scenario, because if a seller is still associated to the property that you're buying, technically it means that they're still on title.
Right.
You are going to have to now maintain payments to the seller every single month as if they're the servicer, and then you have to rely on them for them to make the payments to their mortgage provider. At the end of the day, whoever owns the mortgage, unless they own the house free and clear, they are still bound by the mortgage lender who has the original loan. So if they default on the loan, you have the ability then now to go into foreclosure. Now that affects you and your property and your home ownership. And also a seller who is willing to do that, they may potentially own other properties. Maybe they have a big business. Who knows if they're involved in some kind of lawsuit? They have to go through a divorce. They have to sell their assets.
Right.
Then what happens, right? So in my opinion, it's definitely not the first route I would go. It's more kind of the last case scenario, but I would absolutely recommend to just get a loan from a traditional bank for sure.
So the fine print on this, there's always fine print to everything, is as a buyer, going seller financing would be last resort. You can't get approved through a mortgage. Maybe you don't have the full 20 down payment and you're trying to avoid some fees. But even by doing so, it sounds like you're still not owning the property as a seller financing option, correct? Because the seller still owns it until you pay off that loan.
Right, and they could potentially sell it or get involved in a loss. Like, who knows, right? You're just putting the fate of your home and your home ownership still in the hands of somebody else.
Right, and using a lender and a bank, you at least have that peace of mind and credibility that you do have insurance, right? If something were to happen, I mean, you have insurance with a big bank backing you up, as opposed to a seller and something happened in the real world and now they have a lien on the house and supposedly it's yours.
Right, or a tax lien. I mean, you just don't know. There's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of hypotheticals. The best and safest way would be to obtain your own financing and not involve the seller. And that's really from the buyer's perspective.
Okay, now let's kind of go into a little bit on the seller side. When would it be, because I've gone in a couple listing appointments this last week and a seller has owned the house free and clear and they want to list it on the market a little bit higher than they probably should, but they kind of look at seller financing and the price that they're putting in, like, hey, I'm willing to put in my own money.
Yeah.
If I get this dollar amount for my house, I'll finance the house. Is there pros and cons for a seller when they're wanting to offer those financing to buyers?
You know, from a seller perspective, again, there's a lot of hypotheticals. There's a lot of potential pros and cons to that one. As a seller, if I own my home free and clear, then yes, that could be something that you could do. You could offer up a loan to whoever the buyer is, whether, you know, and essentially what you have to remember is that whoever the buyer is, they're now becoming your tenant, right? That's something that you have to keep in mind. Now you've got to make sure that they are making the monthly payments. You've got to make sure that you are paying your insurance and any mortgages that are still due on the property. But if you own the home free and clear, and maybe, you know, you've got, you know, your fleet of houses, right? In that scenario, then maybe that makes sense if it's a higher end home, and maybe the financing makes sense for the buyer and the seller. I can see a scenario like that where it works out, but what it does again is it keeps that property still in your portfolio. It's still a liability on your books, and it doesn't get you essentially what you want, which is to offload it, sell it, and then potentially take that cash and move it to another investment. So, you know, it really is dependent on who the seller is, who the buyer is. It's really a case by case. I think it works best in an investor to investor kind of relationship, but for a traditional homeowner or just a seller who, you know, is selling their primary, going to buy another primary, I don't recommend it because it'll hinder your ability on the new property. And it's just another headache. You have now a tenant on a property that you still own. Your intention was to sell it, not to rent it.
Right, and you bring up a great point when you said, what if the buyer does not make their monthly payments and they default on the loan? Now what is a seller to do? Now they have this tenant in their house that's not making the mortgage payments, and how do they get them out when you have this contractual agreement?
Right. Well, and that's going to be state specific. Like California, I mean, we all know, right? California, the tenants have more rules, the tenants have more rights, right? The tenants have more rights and protection than the landlords do. So in California, you've got to go through a whole eviction process. So there's a lot of things that can happen, you know, down the road if things don't go perfect, right? So again, pros and cons, seller side, a lot of different angles to look at it.
Right. No, this is great information. I think just based off talking to you about seller financing, I think, in my opinion, and it could be different for anyone else watching this, is stay away from seller financing. To me, I feel like there's just too many cons than there are pros. I could see the pros, but there's just too much liability and cons to go the seller financing route. Since we're here with Elena and you know everything that there is about mortgage, I'm curious from your perspective, what the real estate market looks like on the lending side of things. We know what it looks like on the real estate side of things. You know, we're having less buyers being qualified, high rates. What are you seeing in the mortgage industry as far as applications, and where are you focusing a lot of your attention and time now?
You know, mortgage applications have, you know, it's no secret that it's been a little bit of a decline in the last few months. But at least for Groves Capital, for our company, we've been really focusing on where there are opportunities. So, you know, the applications are down, yes, but that's also for maybe first-time home buyers or people who are just starting to get into you know, developing their portfolio. The reality is that there's a lot of opportunities that are happening right now. People are either lowering their prices. So what we're seeing is a lot of investors are coming through. So there's a lot more rehab loans happening, a lot more developments, a lot more buildings. So for us on the mortgage side, we not only specialize in residential mortgages, although residential mortgage applications for us have increased about 2% in the last month or two. So there's been a small little uptick, which is great. But more so on the commercial side. The commercial side has been absolutely booming. People are going crazy, scooping up properties left and right, rehabbing them, developing them. So we're noticing a big jump in that. And that's really where we're specializing in as well. But you know, at the same time, this time of the year, there's usually a little bit of a dip, mortgage and real estate. People are getting back from the holidays, getting back into their groove with school. And then, you know, usually in the summertime, we start seeing a little bit of more activity in real estate and mortgage anyway. So, you know, regardless of our economy and how things are moving, it's kind of a general trend, I would say, up and down. What goes up must come down at some point. So we're still staying exceptionally busy, residential and commercial, but definitely we're seeing a lot of activity on the investment side of things.
I mean, that's positive news. I mean,
people are still moving money.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it immensely in the real estate side. I think December was very quiet. Everyone was traveling for the holidays. And then January came and it's just like everyone came out of the woodwork.
Oh, they woke up.
Yeah, they woke up. I think the new rates have been normalized now. I think it took some time for buyers to understand this is the new normal, and everyone was hesitant, concerned about the market. The holidays happened, they digested it, and they came back the new year ready to buy a home because everyone needs a home.
Yeah, pretty much. And you know, the funny thing is the 2s and 3s and rates that were, I mean, come on, we all took advantage of them. But it wasn't normal. Like, if we look at a 20, 30 year time frame, I mean, 6%, that was considered amazing. And we're below that right now. So it's still an amazing opportunity to invest, whether you're a first time investor or home buyer, or you're looking to just expand your portfolio in general. Rates are still great. The properties are still cash flowing if you're renting it. So, you know, I think really kind of getting out of that idea of, oh, rates have gone up. I think if we can get past that and really see it from a big picture, bird's eye view, I think a lot of people are seeing that is still an opportunity.
Yeah, and what I tell people is if you can afford the monthly payment, that's what you need to be concerned about, because you can always, as long as you can afford the monthly payment and you're comfortable with it, your house is going to increase in equity, here, especially here in San Diego.
Oh, especially here.
I mean, it's very rare that I see it dip permanently or for very long. So I think as a buyer going into it, don't look so much at the rate right now. Look at the monthly payment and look at the bird's eye view, like you mentioned now, and look at the asset that you're owning. Yeah,
absolutely. Great advice.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening in today. As we were talking about seller carrybacks and what's going on in the lending industry, I think we could take a lot from this interview here. In my opinion, again, summary, stay away from seller carrybacks. I'll list the pros and cons below, so that way you can read a little bit more about it and also understand a little bit about the mortgage side with Elena. If you have any questions about mortgage or your real estate journey looking to buy or sell, please contact us below. We'll have our information.